Okay, okay. So I'm going to do this video with a webcam on the whole time. Um, just an experimentation. So don't really mean anything, but it's just me experimenting. So we're going to go through the whole process that we went over in class again, and it's pretty much going to be the exact same process, except I'm going to make it, if anything, a little bit easier or a little bit more streamlined, because I'm not going to use so many different layers, but it's pretty much going to be the exact same process. But I'm going to do it on Laura because she's got much more skin detail. So when I pull off that normal map, it's going to give me a lot more information to play with. And we're going to take this all the way through to something that's pretty damn finished. We're going to go through obviously the creating of the subdermis, the creation of the dermis, the yellowing, the purples, the darkenings, skin blemishes, freckles, the whole 9 yards. So it shouldn't take us too long. But first of all, we're going to start off in ZBrush here. So let me put my pen there. And all we're going to do is just make sure we're ready to export this. So I've already checked this mesh, but I will do it again. So I'm going to bounce up my and just double check the low poly mesh again. But I've got my head here and I've got all my subdivision levels. So this is my lowest subdivision level, and it goes up and up and up and up and up until 7. This is all good. So what I'm going to do is just do my multi-map exporting. I'm going to check my head before I take it into Painter. But what I'm going to do is do my multi-map exporting. So this has UVs on it, which is good. Obviously, it's been retopologized. I've brought it in. I've reprojected over the Dynameshed version. Then after that, sculpted all the proper information into there. So skin wrinkles, blemishes, spots, some asymmetrical details, that kind of jazz. And I've done another pass over this just to make some of this information a bit more crisper. There you go. So yeah, what we do for taking out the maps from ZBrush is just go up to Z plugin, multi-map exporter, and then what do we want to take out? So we want to take out a normal map. We can try and take out an ambient occlusion map, but it never seems to work very well. So we'll do a normal map from ZBrush, and then do everything else inside Substance Painter. So Z plugin, multi-map exporter, normal. I'm going to do this as an 8K straight from, because this should work. I shouldn't see any, there should be no issues with this mesh. But always, check at a lower resolution, check at 1024 or 2048, just to make sure that everything does work. And then when you're all good, you can come back into ZBrush and just export at a higher resolution. So make sure that's 8196. And then on my options for normal map, I'm just going to make sure that tangent space normal is clicked, adaptive is clicked, smooth UV is clicked, and smooth normals is clicked. So tangent space is obviously just turning it into the normal that we want. If we don't, we have a world space normal, or a world object space normal, which is something that is created inside of Substance Painter anyway when we do our baking. But we don't want that map. We want the blue one with the colours rather than a more like a rainbow kind of effect. Adaptive, if that's turned off, the baking inside ZBrush will be quicker, but it's not going to be as nice. What it's going to say here as I'm hovering over is normal adaptive mode. Adaptive mode will give more accurate maps, detailed areas, but take longer. So it takes a bit longer to render, that's all. Smooth UVs there. It will smooth the UVs before creating the map. So it just means that if I've got any areas of very angular kind of angles on my low poly mesh, it's going to try and do its best to smooth those off. So there's, even in the normal map, we might have like little sharp edges in areas if we don't have this clicked. And then smooth normals, again, smooth the low res. So if I have that turned off, what we're going to have is both this surface detail we've got on there with all the skin pores, but then also the low poly, faceted edged, hard surface kind of thing. So we don't want that. So let's make sure that's turned on. And that's all I want to do. So I'm going to click create all maps, and then I'm going to save those in a place. Whoop. There you go. So I'm going to put these into my head retopo images. So this is, as you can see, this image here. This is from the male head we've been using. That's when you don't click tangent in the exports. It gives you that kind of head, which is what we don't want. So I'm going to call this Laura. I'm just going to start to save those off. So I'm just going to go through the whole process. It's going to take a bit of time. It's saving an 8K map, and it's pulling information from something which is 17 million faces. And you'll probably be able to see that my camera's been a bit sluggish. Because remember, whenever we do these processes, it hijacks ZBrush. So what I'm going to do is actually pause the video and come back when it's done. So we're back. That took about 2-3 minutes then. And we've done our head. So we've got our head here all nice and good. So for the foreseeable, we're not actually going to be coming back into ZBrush because there's no point. Because at this point we're in the texturing phase. The only point we'd ever come back into ZBrush is if we've decided that our normal map just isn't good enough. We want to come in and modify it a little bit. We can come in, modify it, export that new version, and literally just override the versions in Substance Painter. That's how fun and quick these things can be. We might have to do another rebake. But remember, Substance Painter, the way that we work in it is so undestructive that because we use fill layers with generators and black masks and stuff, if we change a mask, or if we change like an ambient occlusion and update it with a different ambient occlusion, we're just going to have everything update automatically because we've not physically painted that stuff in ourselves, unless we are doing like a fill layer, black mask, paint modifier. So it's never really a bad thing to come back and forth from these different softwares. Okay, so we're going to just minimize ZBrush. And I brought it into Maya here just to check everything's looking okay. So that's all good. So again, just double triple checking before we take it into Painter. Which brings us into Painter. So I've reset my UI, and I'll do this for the last time, but I really want people to remember how to modify the maximize the UI as much as they can, because we're only working on one thing at the minute, on one UV for the time being. So in this where it says texture set list at the top here, you're only going to see one thing. That's fine. Layers, obviously where our layers are. Texture set settings. This is where a lot of information is going to be. That's where we actually apply our additional maps, do our bake mesh maps, change the document size resolution. And properties is where we have all the information for our current tool. Eraser, brush, fill layer, whatever. And the assets folder just gets in the way for me. So I'm going to click and drag this off. So I'm going to put this on the other monitor. And then I'm going to move my properties over to the left-hand side like that. There you go. Maximize my workspace. And really, if I was doing this for myself, I'd be working exclusively in pretty much a 3D view. So I'd only be working in this 3D view. But what I want you to do is get comfortable working between these two views, just like we did last year. Get comfortable working between these two views. And get used to looking at UVs and seeing how UVs are laid out and stuff. Okay, so let's actually make this document. So we've exported the low poly version, which is good. We've got our new normal bake, which is good. So I'm going to file new. So I'm going to make a PBR, just metallic roughness. I'm not even going to do the one with subsurface scattering in this. I'm just going to leave it alone for now. I'm going to input my file. So I'm going to go find my head. There you go. So I'm going to leave my document resolution alone. Now I'm going to preemptively change a setting in here, because remember when we were bringing in that head in class, we were first applying that normal map. It looked weird, so then we had to go to edit, project configuration, change that normal map format from DirectX to OpenGL, because the default for ZBrush is an OpenGL normal map. Just right at the beginning, I'm just going to change that to OpenGL right there. And then in my, I can untick auto, I don't even need, these won't do anything, but I don't need these. Import bake mesh maps, or import bake maps. I'm going to go and find that image. So I stuck it in the images folder, like that. And we're all good to go. Cool. So, first of all, what I want to do is just make sure that I am getting that normal map on there, #1. So in my texture set settings, just to the left of, or to the right of layers, I'm going to come down where you've got all these mesh maps here. So I'm going to go up to the top where it says normal map, and it should be this one. It should be right there. If not, all you have to do at the top is type in the, start typing in the name of that file, and it'll filter through and find it. Put that one in. I'm also, right from the beginning, going to change in the general properties, just at the top of this menu, I'm going to change the size to 4K. There we go. So there we go, we've got our normal map in there, looking nice. All the information is being pulled through. Now I'm going to bake my other maps. So again, just inside this menu, bake mesh maps. Number one, my output size 8K, because we want to make these as high as possible. Now we're going the route of already having baked our normal map, but if we were going baking our in our from high to low inside here, we'd import our high resolution mesh inside here, but we're not doing that. So then what I do, let's move that out of the way for a sec, is I'll actually move you over here, so you're just out of the way. There you go. So on the left hand side here, behind my head, so I'll just move my head for now. Ooh, myself down here. There you go. We've got a normal map already, so we can untick that normal map. We're going to have a world space normal. We don't need an ID because we're only dealing with one UV. And then the rest are fine. Now we might not necessarily come to need all of these maps, but it's good to have them if we do need them. And then the other three at the bottom we don't need to worry about. So ambient occlusion, this is all good. I don't need to change anything inside here. This uses the normal map and the low poly surface to generate a normal map, which is good. An ambient occlusion map. The curvature, we're going to change this from generate from mesh to generate from normal map. Like that. Position, that's all good. Thickness, this is all good. And world space normal has nothing. So with all that done, I'm just going to click bake selected textures, and this shouldn't actually take too long. It will take a long time if we were baking from a high poly mesh down to a low poly mesh, but because we've already got our normal map made, it kind of it jumps the really heavy section. So if I do this, it'll take no time at all. Take a quick drink. And you obviously can see the maps being created here. Now, one difference in Laura's head, next to the head we've been using, let's call him Gary, to Gary's head, is her ears have actually been brought off in the UV. They're actually separate from the UV. So you might see when it's being baked, you might see some little black lines going around her ear. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. Obviously, you're not going to be using this head, but that sometimes might happen. You might get these little seams appearing, but they shouldn't have any effect. The higher resolution you bake at, the less that's going to kind of affect our mesh. So that's done. So I return, and I'm just going to press B to cycle through my baked maps. So that's your ambient occlusion, which is all looking good, looks okay. Some little sharp bits, it's not a perfect mesh. If we were doing this on a mesh that was denser, so what I've done in the actual project for this, where's ZBrush? ZBrush has seemed to have lost itself. Where is ZBrush? I think ZBrush is saving, that's why I can't. There it is. Nope, that's Substance Painter. Okay, never mind. So my head that I've used in the project that's on my ArtStation is actually if I can find. I don't know where they've moved the new subdivide. Smooth. So the head that's on my ArtStation, a version of this, is technically this resolution. It's technically like one step upwards. So the ambient occlusion map on that's a lot smoother. Technically. Okay. but we did. Then go through. This is our curvature map. Now this might look really, really dodgy and like kind of rubbish, but don't worry about it. We're gonna use this. Well, we might use this a little bit later on for making more like blackheads, spots. Use it to do something to the lips, that kind of stuff. So we don't need, you know, super fine crisp information, and all the rest we know. We might even use the thickness later on as well. So press M to get back to normal. Awesome. Okay, so what are the things we're going to be making? Oh, the levels. So working from the lowest first going up to the highest. Number one, we're going to have the subdermis. We'll do this in there you go. Subdermis. That's the lowest level of the skin. That's our pepperoni, you know, fresh flesh kind of looking. And then from there, we're going to go up. I know it's just confusing because I'm writing downwards to the dermis, which is your skin. So those are two of the first things I'm going to do straight away. And then from there, I'm going to move on to the extra kind of stuff. I'm going to move on to spots / freckles. Then I'm going to be going on to something like, I don't know what you might call it, blemishes. I don't even know how to spell blemishes, so I'm going to spell blemishes. I think that's how you spell it, like that. And then I'm going to go on to lightening / yellowing. And this is quite simply areas where the skull is close to the surface of the skin. It gets a little bit brighter. And then from there, I'm going to create a spec map or a kind of roughness map to create a more realistic skin surface. And then from there, then I'll be going on to rendering. And where you render this is up to you. I'm going to show you how to render it in a couple of different things. That's going to be a different video. I'm going to be showing you how to render it in Substance Painter, something called Substance Stager, which is something that comes in this whole package. In Maya, I'm going to show you how to render it in Unreal, and I'll also show you how to render it in Marmoset, which isn't something you need to have, by the way. It's something if you're really into doing 3D stuff and really into doing 3D character stuff, it's very good to have. I probably avoid doing Blender just because I'm not super good with rendering in Blender. For this kind of stuff, I'm good for doing like more graphic designy. I do a lot of album arts in Blender, so you don't need to render the same way. Yeah, so I'll be going through this kind of process, going basically from the most simplest bit of information through to really complex information, and then onwards to rendering. There was another thing in there as well. Oh yeah, I'll be using fill layers for the entire thing. So if I change the color now, the main layer we're going to be using is a fill layer. With a black mask. And then some form of modifier. And that modifier might be a paint modifier, might be a fill modifier, might be a filter, might be a a generator. It depends entirely what I want to do. Because I'm going to be going through this, and then I might, after I'm doing blemishes, or before I do blemishes, I might go back and make another subdermis layer, but above everything else. So we did it in class where I used the ambient occlusion to help me create some reddening around the eyes and around the mouth. But it was on top of everything. But it was looking like my dermis layer, so it was kind of, I was flipping the script for a little bit. So that's the order in which I'm going to do stuff. And like I said before, I'm going to do this a little bit more streamlined like I did in class. Again, pulling back the shade, why I had people make so many different fill layers and do so many different black masks is to get it ingrained in your head. because so many people forget how to do this stuff, the simple stuff, and that's the really, really simple stuff. But what I'm going to do is make very few layers and rely mainly on modifiers, and then changing the layer blendings of those modifiers so that they work with each other very well. Okay. So off we go, and I'm going to put my pen away for now. And come out of this mode. There we go. Boom. So number one, I'm going to make a fill layer, and this fill layer is just going to be a color. I'm not going to do anything weird to do with roughness or anything just yet. But this fill layer is going to be, again, contrary to what we did in class a little bit, this is going to be the lighter blue, the lighter red color. So I'm going to find my lightest blood color essentially. The way we did it in class is perfectly fine. It's just another different. This is just a different way of doing it. That's all it is. There's no wrong or right way of doing this. As long as you get the same visual result, don't matter how you do it. So I'm going to go about making, you know, a brightish skin red color, like that. And then I'm going to do a fill layer again. So I'm going to call that base. I'm going to call this subderm. And this is going to be the brighter colors, the darker colors. So I'm going to make this a bit darker, both in chroma and in value. So it's more over in that red spectrum, because if we look back at the base color there, the chroma of this is more saturated. No, sorry, more desaturated and higher in the chroma. Oh, sorry, higher in the values, lesser in the chroma, so more desaturated. But then this new one I've just brought in, which would be the darker elements, I've made this basically full chroma and down in the values. Cool. So this is going to be the same method we use for everything. I'm going to move my head to a better position. Actually, I'm going to leave it there because I don't think we're really going to need anything here for now. Just my OCD, I'm going to just... There you go. So yeah, we've made a new fill layer. We're going to add a black mask to it. Boom, like that. And what we're going to do first of all is start adding a bunch of different noises to generate that surface, and then after a couple of different noises I'm going to add a paint modifier to bring in some of the more veiny elements, and then I'm going to add back a few more noises. But all this is going to be on the exact same layer, so I'm not going to make a new darker color just for doing that, nothing like that. So in here I'm going to add a fill modifier, and in my asset I'm going to add a noise. So if I go to my textures there, I can type in noise. I'm looking for a noise, that's all. So I could go for something like B&W1, that's quite nice, it's quite spotty. I've got this, so I want to have something which through the whole kind of image is relatively not too contrasting. I don't want to have like super blacks and super whites. I want to have stuff that altogether looks a bit more into grey values. And something just a bit noisy. Now what I'm going to do as well is blend in between very, very sharp details and very, very soft details. So at the beginning I'm going to go for something a bit more spottier. I'm going to go for this B&W spots 1. So just click and drag that into grayscale. Move that away. And there we go. So you can see how that works straight away. If I just turn that off, there you go. In fact, I'm going to add that roughness layer early on. Actually, I think it'll be nice if we work with that. So I am just going to move that fill layer to the top, or make that fill layer at the top, and just make a roughness, and just make my roughness up to 0.5. There we go. Because then we don't have to deal with that very, very shiny surface for all the time. You know, we can have them work a bit nicer. Okay. So yeah, I've added that B&W spots 1, so you can see what's happened to the surface now, which is nice. You know, we've got balances we can, you know, play with, but I'm going to leave that alone. We've got contrast we can play with. I'm going to leave that alone. But we've got tiling. Now, tiling is fun because we can actually make it very, very tiled or very, very not tiled. But what I want you to be careful with, and I saw this a lot in class, is people are bumping this up too much, and it becomes very, very obvious that it's tiled. And we want randomization in it. We want to have that random surface. So if you are going to use a tiling, you just have to move it like fractionally either side. But one thing I am absolutely going to do as well is at the top where it says projection. Currently this is being projected onto the UVs, and that gives us this little line at the top of the head. If I turn this from UV projection to triplanar, so we're going from projecting a 2D image down onto the UV to projecting as it's like projecting onto the 3D mesh, we get rid of that little seam at the back. And this is going to be the same thing running throughout the entire project. So absolutely do not get like about this. It's the same jars all the time. Okay, that's cool. And what I can do as well is decide, are my colors okay? Is my base red too much, not enough? Is my new dermis too much, not enough? You know, all the cool stuff. But I'm going to leave it like that for the time being. So this is looking pretty good. To this black mask again, so back onto this layer, I'm going to go add a new fill layer, or fill modifier. I'm going to change it to linear dodge, or screen. I think screen, there you go. So you got to explore these different layer blendings on each one of these. It doesn't matter about the very bottom one, because there's nothing underneath it to actually affect. But everything above it, play with the different layer blendings to get the best result. So I'm going to go and find another one. So we've got something that's very spotty there. So I'm going to go for something that's a little bit more grainy. So I'm going to go for BMW Spots 3. Drag that in. And then I can play with these layer blendings. Which one of these is going to give me the best results? And the results that I want is something more like this. I'm now just getting that extra level of detail of that breakup. Because this one is far more softer. It's higher in the values. You'll be able to hear the fireworks in the background probably as well. You know, I can play with the tiling a little bit. You know, maybe I just do maybe 4.5 on the tiling. Change that projection to triplanar. There we go. You know, what happens if I invert it here? Okay, so that's giving me some... it doesn't fix or change anything. It just gives us a bit of result. Well, it does change stuff, but it gives us a different look. So if I press C to go to my color channel, yeah. Because the values of this particular map are so similar, they're all very kind of much on an even value scale. It's not going to change. It's not going to massively change what we're looking at. So either of them, I'm not bothered. I'm just going to keep it like that. So I've got a true invert. I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to add another fill. And this time what I want to do is drag in something that's got a lot more spotty detail. So we've got stuff like, if I just take away noise now and I just have my texture section open, I can look through and find something a bit spottier. See what's in procedurals. Is there anything heat? No. Stay in here. There we go. So I want something that's very open. So you've got these pebble spots here. You've got these scratches here. Spots here. You got these grunge spots. I don't want it too dense. I'm going to see what grunge spots dirt is going to look like. So, okay, and then go through the layer blendings here to find out which one suits me. Okay. Now this one really hasn't got any options to change anything. So if I go for about a 7 on the tiling on that one, so you can see what that's actually adding to the surface. So we're on linear dodge there, but what else can I do? So I'm keeping that a screen again. But you can see that just adds a bit more break up to the surface. I'm going to duplicate that effect. And then I'm just going to change the rotation. So what I'm doing here is I've literally just duplicated that modifier, right click duplicate effect, and I'm just changing the rotation. That's all I'm doing. Just to add a bit more whatever. Now what I'm going to do is do a bit of painting. So I'm going to go in and start adding some veins around the eyelids, around the cheeks, because this is where we can actually start to look at some new imagery. So we looked at cross-polarized photography in the class, but we're also going to look at something called RBX photography. So I'm going to pause the video, bring them up, and show you some stuff. Okay, so I got the images now. So what we're going to look at first is RBX imaging, RBX imaging, and this is, it might not make sense why we're looking at it first, but when I explain it, it is very cool. And then we're going to look at cross-polarized after that, but cross-polarized is more about skin stuff. Okay, so RBX imaging here is used for like skin damage. It's like a dermatological science kind of thing, and it's a very, very clever camera that's able to take photographs and reveal blood vessels and skin damage. So these aren't just colorized, photoshopped versions of the image. What we're seeing here in these images are the blood vessels of the skin, and then the sun damaged elements of the skin, like freckling, tanning, that kind of stuff. It must be to do with like different wavelengths, and it takes pictures. It's very, very cool. But it's surprising what you see in this kind of face here. You know, you can see that reddening on the inside of the eye, on the corner of the nose, obviously on the lips, but then you can see like these two very, very dark dots in his nose. You can see those two dots right there. So these are very, very good imaging types to see kind of that more subsurface detailing that really makes a person's skin realistic. I'm mainly focused on this one for now, the vascular one. You can see here, he's much more redder face, and you can see here on his cheeks, that's where you got a lot more of that subsurface vascular kind of build up there. Obviously his lips. Not as much here, though. What you can see is this really beautiful structure in the eye, and you can just about see it there. It's like a vein right in the nose there, you can kind of see. So this is the next bit I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be making this, and I want you to imagine that I'm almost going to make the next two layers are almost going to be this. So I'm almost like this is a white surface, and then I've done two layers of this reddening on top of it. Okay, but I'm going to do this all on the same layer of what we got here, just using different modifiers. Oh, well, paint modifiers, but in different ways. So I'll bring my tablet down a bit closer again. And right click. So I'm going to add a paint modifier this time, because this one, I'm going to set this to screen again, I'm going to use a brush to do this. A brush. And I'm going to use a couple of different brushes to do this at first, because I'm going to use something where I can just physically paint in blood vessels for particular stuff, and then I'm also going to use one of these brushes where I can find it. I think it's that one. It's one of these ones around here. It's one of the Kyle brushes that I'll be able to just kind of like splotch down the odd little cluster of veins. Now we did look at that organic brush in class, and it's just fun to play with. But for this, it's not controllable enough. It's unpredictable to what we want. Sometimes every like 10 or 15 strokes or taps, it might give you a good result. But for this, I don't think it's really going to help us. So what I'm going to do first of all is do a lot of broken up bits. So I think it is pretty much only going to be those Kyle brushes for me at the time being. Hate when it docks like that. There we go. Yeah, so it's pretty much going to be these Kyle brushes, Kyle concrete brushes. Where have you gone? There you go. Yeah, so that. And with the brushes, you don't have to click and drag them into anything. As long as you're obviously on a paint thing, so in this case I'm on a paint modifier, press 1 for your paintbrush and just click it and you're okay. So leave it over there. Let me just get that. And I'll break up the surface a little bit. And I'm working asymmetrically as well here. So now one thing I'm going to do is angle jitter I'm going to put all the way up. Size jitter I'm going to bring up a little bit. Flow jitter I'm going to leave where it is. And maybe just knock up position jitter. Because I get some randomness. What I don't want to do is put down the exact same stamp in the exact same orientation in the exact same place every time. Because it's going to look very fake. So I'm going to go for someone who's got a bit more of a rosier cheek. And just tap down. If I go too cold there, yeah. You can see what I'm doing. There you. So if I look at the RBX imaging, where's my PureRef? There you go. So if I look at this image here, I'm looking for these darker areas here, especially when I'm going to cluster this around. And I'm very, very light with this. I'm not clicking and dragging and scrubbing like this. I'm kind of little flicks and clicks. I'll definitely have some around the ears. I think ears need a bit of veins because ears are quite thin and full of cartilage, but there's still going to be vessels running through it. So your vessels are going to be sharing quite a thin little area. So you're likely to see them in the ears. Cheeks, obviously. Around the eyes, definitely. Some people have definitely got more around the temples. Like that. And then I'm going to go in there with, I'm just going to choose like the most basic of brushes, like a basic hard with pressure. So I'm picking a brush with pressure. Woo! And I'm going to make my size really small. And I'm going to be deliberately painting in some wrinkles now. Now there's also something I'm going to do in a sec after this that allows me to control a bit of information with more of the fill layer generated stuff. Well, first of all, I want to just... I've not set up the stylus for Substance Painter yet, so I'm still getting this little menu popping up. So like that. Okay, so done a bit there. So before I go and do the last bit of this kind of dermis layer, what I'm going to do is add a new paint layer. But I'm going to name this Control. So I was getting a bit of a drink then. Now what this controller is going to do is, well, I'm going to move it. I'm going to physically move it underneath this paint layer, and I can do this a number of different times as well. I can do this a bunch of times, but this control layer is just set to multiply. All it's doing is set to multiply, because what we're going to do is use the black and white values on this brush. So it is a paint layer. All I'm going to do is use the black and white values to basically erase some of the information here. Now again, because I got everything else set to screen, I can move this around very freely and do what I want, but I'm going to just show you what I can do with it. So, specify. Oh, not that. There you go. So if I bring my paint that I've just done then, so I'm going to name this veins so I know what it is, or for vessels. If I want to pull back some of these veins, maybe I've done too many veins or whatever, what I can do is, if I just move this to the bottom, and then move this control on top of it, like this, what I can do is, something like that. If I set it to black, so I'm pressing X to set the brush to black, what I'm doing is I can erase that information. Very, very cool. I can erase that information. But the magic thing about this is I'm not actually erasing the information. Because if I set this back to white, I can paint the information back. Because all I'm doing is using the black and white value to hide information. Don't try and think about the science of this. Just trust me what I'm saying. So what I'm doing here is just using that black and white value to control tons of stuff. Very, very easily. So in fact, if I set everything to screen, I'm just going to do everything to screen. So my vessels are at the very bottom of the face. Like that. I am going to set these to... Where's my thing? Either... I'm going to set these to normal. There you go. So on my control brush there, I'm going to turn my brush into a nice big soft air brush. So I'm going to turn on concrete to 1. Bring the opacity quite low. And what I can do is just you have to make this quite strong to do this. There you go. Feather back. I can just push back some of that information. So you can see where I've gone a little bit too into the mouth there. I can just push it back. You can see I'm kind of erasing it from the mouth, erasing it from top of the nose. I'm airbrushing it out essentially, so I'm airbrushing it instead. I've taken away that harsh brush because I don't want any very, very sharp lines. But as like with black, you always have to make it a bit more stronger to really have an impact. There you go. White is quite a dominant colour when it comes to the masks. So you can see what I'm doing there. I'm just painting it back, pushing some stuff back. So we're definitely where I don't want it to be. I can just push it back a little bit. So this is such a non-destructive way of working. Because all I'm doing here is just painting with black and white on a mask. Everything's still there. If I turn this off, this control, like if I hide that, all that information is still there. It's literally just this layer which is controlling it. It's so cool. And the only thing you really have to do is obviously just set this control to layer blend multiply. Okay. Cool. So you can go through and make a bunch of those. So if I make another one at the very top, so I'm going to make multiple controls. So add a paint, call it control 2 or con2, set it to multiply, make this big, then I can affect everything, because this is at the very top of the stack, it's going to affect everything below it. You know, but maybe I only want to affect these two, so I'm letting these two grunge spots at the very top be uncontrolled. See, I'm moving around these modifiers all I want, and I'm getting all the fun control. Okay, so that's cool. So I'm going to get rid of that one. So the last one I'm going to make is another paint layer, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in those darker forms. So if we look back at our RBX imaging, where's PureRef? There's PureRef. So bottom lip, bit of the upper lip, corner of the nose, on top of the eyelids. In this case, because you've got our eyes open, it's a bit hard to get the upper eyelid, but definitely somewhere around the eyes. Some bits inside the ears. I am going to turn symmetry on for this one, so symmetry's up here. That's a bit strong in that flow. Maybe turn position jitter down a little bit, so it's a bit more of a normal brush. So let's give ourselves a... So in this particular case, what I'm doing here to erase is I'm literally just using an eraser. I'm just giving it a bit of a different alpha, so I'm using an eraser with a Kyle Cement. Oh, it's not a Kyle Cement, just Cement 1. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. Ooh, no. There you go. I wonder why it wasn't working then. So 1 is your brush, 2 is your eraser. Right up in the nose. There's lots of red around the nose. The eyes. Corner of the mouth. And inside the ears. So I'm jumping back and forth from like a material mode and just a base color mode here, just so I know what I'm painting. Right. Touching up to a little bit asymmetrical, and I think there you go. So those are all my dermis layers that I'm doing. I can probably bring my... No, I'll move that back down. There we go. So do like a last minute just kind of quick check over. So I'm going to change some of the intensities as well. Just to get my balance. Cool. A new fill layer. Now I'm going to do my purpling. So I'm going to just add a new fill layer. Just a colour. Make it a nice deep purple. So not high chroma purple, but very low in the values. You know, middle high chroma. So something like this. Again, black mask. Add a fill layer. Add a paint modifier. Keep calling it fill layer. Again, I'm going to turn symmetry on for this. And you don't want tons of this as well. You just want a little bit around places. Like there and there. That's about it. Nothing much at all. So this is, I'm just going to call this perp for purple. I'm going to go, okay, it's like we're just coming up to an hour now. Perp. Cool, so I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to call this subdermis. Stick all these in there. There you go. So that's my subdermis done. I can always come back and, oh, you know what I forgot to do actually? I forgot to do my lips. What a silly Billy. What an absolute silly Billy. There is another setting I'm just going to change very quickly in Substance Painter. And this is just a personal thing for me. The camera focal length is a bit too rubbish for me. It's Dumatrian. So I got to remind myself how to change that. So it'll be in settings. It'll be display settings. It'll be in the camera. There you go. So I'm at a horrendous level here, so I'm gonna move this about 80. I'm gonna move something 90 millimeters. That's more like what we do inside ZBrush. More fireworks in the background. Okay. So far, so good. So yes, now we've got all the dermis done. The lips have been done. The darker areas have been done. You know, we got that build up. Now it's time to all go in there and do the skin color. So I'm going to do that again. Just the color. Grab a skin color. I'm not being too precious about this because again, we could always come back and just change that base layer color. But I'm going to do the exact same thing that I just did with the dermis. I'm going to pick one color. To say don't be precious, I don't all of a sudden I'm being precious. So I'll do it like that. I'm just going to build it from there. So I'm only going to use one colour for my skin. So I call this dermis. I'm just going to use a paint layer in this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one paint modifier, which is going to be more of the softer information. Another one's going to be the tighter information. So again, I'm going to go to my brushes. And I'm going to find something nice and I'll do my big soft details first. So I'll go for this concrete light. That looks quite nice and soft. And this is where I bring in my second load of images. So we've had a look at RBX photography. So RBX imaging, that should say, not imaging. And I'm going to make this stuff later on. So I'm going to come back to this when we got the basic skin tone on there. But now what we're going to be looking at is cross-polarized photography, which you looked at in class, and I got a few other images inside here. So cross-polarized photography is taking a picture of someone, but then using filters, removing all the highlight information, so all you get is basically the color. It's a real-life base color map. So this image is really interesting because it looks very weird. It's a real human being. It's not a CGI image or anything like that. But because you don't have that highlight information, it just looks a bit strange, doesn't it? Yeah, it just looks really, really. I mean, there is a little bit of obvious touch-up that's happened there, but you can see there that looks interesting and weird. So I've got these two here. And what this is doing is exposing that generalized skin condition. So, skin isn't this flat, amorphous blob. It's got all the blemishes, it's got all the reddening, it's got all the discolorizations that you would have. That's why we build up this dermis layer first. So you can see where you've got your reddening, you can see where, hopefully it's coming through the recording, but you can kind of see some blue veins inside there, which we'll add a bit later on. You can see where you've got some reddening across the top of the head, some yellowing across that thinner area of skin, so where the skull is closest to the surface, reddening the corner of the nose there, reddening obviously the red of the lips, reddening inside the eye there. This is all the stuff that we have on our faces. All these spots, all these spots. So we've got her, and then we've got her underneath. So her red is more like purple. So she's much, much, much paler. And got a lot of purple in the skin, and quite a lot of yellow, as you can see as well. And this top one here, which is this is the highest resolution I could get for these images. You can see there's a lot of red around the eyes. There's a lot of yellow across this lower part of the muzzle, a lot of yellow across the top of the head there. So what we're going to do is basically start to chase this look on our flat surface. Obviously, we're not dealing with hair or anything just yet, so we're missing all that. But what we're going to get is something more like this. We're even going to get the black of we're going to force the shadow on the inside of the nose. I'm going to use this. So let me get my pen. Where's my pen? And this is absolutely time where I would stick on a podcast or stick on some music that just helps you chill, keeps you focused. So I'm going to turn off symmetry for this, actually. And all we do is I'm just doing quick circles. And I'm going to move around, quick circles. We want coverage, but we don't want total coverage. That's the big thing about this. We do not want total coverage. So we're airbrushing our character. And with airbrushing, you don't do like when you do models and you brush it, when you do like a base coat of a little model, you base coat that, completely cover it. But when you do more makeup based stuff like this, you build up in layers, and that's what we're doing, building up in subtle layers. Because I think it was the second class where I showed this. Once we got to like the end of the session, I showed you just how much of this red is actually, though you can't necessarily see it very apparent. If you were to change that red to like a bright green, it's crazy how much is actually still visible. So let's take a bit of time. And like I said, you want jitter, position jitter is good. You just want randomness. We're not painting detail in this. We're just doing random information. So all the angle jitter set to 100. Position jitter set up a little bit. Flow jitter, size jitter. Okay, so like something like that. Still a lot of that information is coming through. So then I'm going to do another one. Go away. So add another paint. This time I'm going to use something which is a little bit sharper, a bit more spottier. So I've got this Real Watercolor Splatter Spread. Not I could use this one, Real Watercolor Splatter Mixed. I've got this Real Watercolor Salt Medium. Splatter brushes. Let's try this splatter brush. See what that's like. No, straight away I kind of pretty much know this isn't going to be right. I see. Maybe that might be okay. And you might see this white line appearing on my head here. That's just because I'm working at high resolution. I think what it's doing is it's kind of like not trying to cover up that seam of the UV at the top of the head until I let go, and then it does kind of calculate it. So let's change the brush. So I'm not going to make a new layer. I'm literally just going to change the brush to something else. It's quite a nice one. Paint box, that was called. Still in the Kyle's brush menu. So I've really got to change a lot of these settings. So bring it again. I want to bring the flow right down. The one problem with using too much splattery kind of information is it can make your surface look a little bit spotty in a bad way. So you definitely do want to come up to like a skin condition kind of level. But what you can see, you can still see some really nice information there. You can still see some reddening. You can still see that purpling. You know, it looks somewhat okay. Now I'm just going to quickly demonstrate again how much we can actually see underneath. So you're still seeing quite a lot of that subdermis level coming through. So again, it is quite surprising how much is actually still visible. So spend a few more minutes just tying up. Maybe change the brush again to something maybe a little bit less spottier. Let's go back to something like Cement 1, but again bring down that stroke opacity, that flow opacity, you know. So now we're getting close. You know, we are getting close there. My painter sometimes just seems to stop working for a second. It always freaks me out. Okay, so we'll leave it there for now. At least for that. So we've got a nice base cover there. We've got quite a lot of information in there, but there still is a lot of that red subsurface information there. We can still see a little bit of that discolorization around the nose and stuff. But we're going to add another layer in this, and we're going to have another one of those control layers. So I'm going to make this into a multiply layer. I'm going to call this control. And just remind ourselves what these control layers do. It's without destroying the information underneath, it's using the black and white values to basically temporarily erase what's there. So, you know, I can push back to the dermis level again, but not really. It's super wicked. So what I can do is just start to softly, maybe turn on symmetry for this again. Turn down the stroke, turn down that flow again. Stroke opacity. There we go. Again, I'm airbrushing this information and I don't want to take all of it away too fast. So I've tightened up my stroke a little bit more, so I've brought my position jitter back down to 0. My angle jitter, you know, I could leave it 180, but I could also bring it back a little bit more. It's mainly down to the stroke opacity and the flow. And again, I'm thinking about that RBX imagery. So where are you going to have those reddening areas? Where you're going to have the reddening areas around the nose, like around here. So this is now taking away some of that coverage, bringing back some of that realism. Around the mouth, definitely. Around the eyes. And I tend to ride my controls quite a lot when I'm doing this. So a bit more of that information. Because then I can always just, I keep pressing C, flip back to white, bring that flow right down, and then bring back a little bit more of that skin. If I feel like I pushed it back too much, I can always just invert back to white and push it back in. Because again, it's just another layer. It's so non-destructive. Now I'm doing this with a stylus, so I've got pressure sensitivity on. Let's get a bit more in the ear. So you can spend quite a while in this section just, you know, carefully stripping away, pulling back, stripping away. Very similar to how we do it in ZBrush. You know, bringing back that information, pushing it back in, pulling it back out. Okay. And then if I want to add a bit more coverage, I can just go back to one of the other two layers. and just start painting in a bit more coverage. And then if we want to then go back and do some control, go back to the control. Because he's looking a little bit clowny at the minute, I think. So I can just pull back some of that information. There we go. Awesome. And then, because I'm only working with one color here, I can decide what color this person is at all. You know, I've got complete control. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some lightening of the skin. I'm going to kind of highlight those areas where the bones are sticking through the surface a bit more, or towards the surface. So again, another fill layer, only going to be color. And I'm going to find a nice, well, first of all, I'm actually going to just color pick the color that I'm using there, but then just brine it up and yellow it a tiny bit. You know, small movements, nothing too much. Black mask, paint modifier. Easy. And then, now I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to control how strong this is using the actual opacity slider here. But what I am going to do is maybe do this with a bit of a better brush. So, basic soft. That's not a basic soft. I want something that's a little more basic and softer. I don't want size. I want the floor to be very low. There we go. That's better. So again, here's where the bones are going to be closer to the surface. So maybe part under, maybe underneath the chin. There. That was a big one. Maybe about here. Take it away. And then I'm going to just decrease that intensity a little bit. Like that. Nice and subtle. So I'm really being very soft with this. There's also, if you look at a lot of this cross-polarized photography, you'll often see, I don't know how obvious it is on this, but a little bit of lightening just around the lips there. So obviously we're doing like the corner of where the cheekbone is here, up across the I keep knocking the mic, sorry. Corner of the cheek here, up around the orbital socket, zygomatic arch area, the glabellar area. A little bit of the jawline there, and a little bit around the mouth. Like I see a little bit of a lightening, not around it like you would pencil in makeup, more on the outside here, and there's a touch of it on the actual node here. It's quite visible there. It's quite visible there. Yeah, you can see it quite clearly there. And on these images, you can kind of see the general area where we're looking at there. So I'm also going to add it around there. to symmetry a little bit. Cool. Awesome. Now I'm going to do that little cheeky trick I was talking about before about using a ambient occlusion map to imply some reddening that's outside of the dermis level. So I'm going to nick that dermis color. So if I make a new layer, oh, that's my bone yellow. Let's call that layer we've just done. I'm going to call this fake derm. Again, just going to be a color. I'm just going to color pick this from there. Black mask. Add a generator because we're going to use a generator this time. And I'm going to use an ambient occlusion generator. Like that. All I need to do obviously is invert it. So, on, off, on, off, on, off. And that's perfect for me. I'm actually not going to touch that at all. That's actually perfect for me. That just adds that extra level of... It evens a lot of stuff out. A lot of that brighter skin detail gets pushed back. A lot of the darker reddening comes out a little bit. In fact, I'm just looking at the camera. You can really see where I've got a big... Looks like I've been punched in the face there. Weird. Okay. Awesome. So now what I'm going to do is bring in the lip color. So again, new layer, lips, color. I'm not really bothered about the skin, the tone just yet, because I just want to get some tone on there. Now, I'm going to do natural makeup, well, no makeup at all. So what I'm going to be doing is not having a very sharp line like you would do with lipstick or lip gloss, something. If you look at lips, again, let's bring back out emoji. If you look at lips, it's a soft blend. You know, from afar it might look very sharp, but really, it's a soft blend from what will be the lips into the actual main skin. So I'm going to be getting some of that in there. There is going to be a difference in tone where I'm going to have like two different values. I'm going to have a lighter value and a darker value, just for the base color. Because I read it a bit darker around the outside, a bit lighter around the outside here, and a bit darker on the inside. So that. I'm just going to start to paint in the lip color. Again, I'm not bothered about the color just yet because that looks very clowny. And then into corners. And then I can tighten it up using the old X, because again, all we're doing is dealing with masks here. So if I need to sharpen any of that up, tighten any of it up, I can do very easily. Now I am going to add one modifier. Oops, I've just realized what I've done wrong. I need to clear this mask. I've not added a paint modifier to this layer. This is something I always do, and it annoys me when I do this. To clear the mask, I've got to add a paint modifier to this. I must always remember to do that. Because my next step wouldn't have worked. Or it wouldn't have worked as easy. It would have been a bit harder to do what I was going to do next. Okay. Yeah, there you go. So, what I was going to do next is, to this I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to add just a basic blur to this. But I'm even going to bring this even, so I'm going to have a really subtle blur. So I'm going to have the blur come down from 0.5 to something like 0.25. So it's a very, 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 very subtle blur. Because I'm already using a soft brush, so it's not like I'm dealing with a very sharp, pixelated line. It's already a softer brush. But now what I'm doing is I'm just adding that extra level of detail, extra level of softness. So you can see on, off, well, on, off, on, off. It's very, very subtle. Cool. So now what I can do is actually get that colour looking correct, because obviously that's not right. We'll go somewhere around there, you know, somewhere around there. Very nice. So what I'm going to do is just take a break from this. I'm going to do save this. I'll save this into my images folder of my head retopo. So again, everything's nice and contained. So I'll call this Laura. There you go. So wait for it to save. There you go. And I'm going to go look at. We're going to take a look at what the current state of what my Laura head is on ArtStation. We're actually going to look at that a bit closer. Okay. So this is what I've got here, and these are renders. So these aren't actually live, but we've gone through the exact same texturing process here. Now on this one, I did add a little bit of makeup around the eyes just to kind of help them pop a bit more. But a lot of this is the exact same process. So what I'm going to do is open up the render view, come to our slides, and have a look at the textures here. So you can see it's looking very similar to what we've got. You know, you've got that noise to the surface, a little bit of discolorization in places. I chose in this one to go a little bit on the pale purple approach to some of this shadowing. You can see here I've actually I've given some smoky eye, is it? So I've given some of that smoky eye. Behind the eye I did paint in some pink, so we've not done that just yet. But you can see everything else so far. You know, we've got that lightening around here. You've got the discolorization. So from there to there to there, you know, it's very similar. Very, very similar. So the next stage I'm going to do now is just make the lips a little bit more lip-like. Just by doing a couple of different layers, so a couple of different fill layers, one a darker one, one a lighter one. The dark one I'm just going to have that go into the recesses, so you can actually use that curvature map for this. And again, I'm going to use the curvature map to create the lighter sections. So not a lot of painting involved with this. But what I'm going to do is just duplicate this layer. For now, I'm just going to duplicate this layer. Like that. I'm going to set it to a multiply, so it gets very dark. Like that. And I'm going to add a generator to this. So I have to kind of brain fart then. Generator, and I'm going to use curvature. So as you can see, a bit scary. What I can do is change it with some of that, mess with some of these settings to get the results that I want. So where are the bits that I'm looking for here? So using blur a little bit. I'm mainly focused on what's going on in the lips. Everything else I can ignore for the time being. So I want it to be in the recesses, obviously. And what I want to do is just have this be a little bit tucked into the recesses of the lips. course it is. Sorry about that. I think I paused the video. So in this curvature here, if we drop down where it says curvature right there, I want to change this mode from edges to cavities. So you only want the cavities to be affected. And then I'm going to turn off all these sliders, turn them all the way down. Because you can see as I'm lowering them down, I'm actually losing some of that other information. And I'm going to go through the sliders and see which ones I actually want to use. So currently, there's nothing being done. So what does Sharp do? Okay, Sharp brings us this information, which is pretty nice because that's actually giving us information in other places that is quite nice. I mean, it might be aging our character a little bit, but you can see there that that is actually adding it into the philtrum, a little bit into the into the cavities, the very sharp points of the cavities. So again, that's quite nice. That we can always paint this out again using that control paint modifier set to multiply. We can always just paint the information in or out we don't want. What does fine do? Okay, fine. Okay, that's bringing in a bit more information. That's actually aging our character quite a lot. Okay. What's soft doing? Okay, soft is this. Medium is this. Large is this. Big is this. Huge is this. Contrast isn't really doing it at this stage. And then invert would obviously do that. So for me, it's this sharp information that's doing it for me, which is really nice. And there's a combination of what's going on up top. So the global blur there, you can see where that's a bit too much over everything. So I'm just going to knock that glow up a little bit, that blur up a little bit. The balance as well, you know, that's just, the more I increase that, the more it's going to be apparent over the entire surface. So I want to be careful of that. And then global contrast. Again, when you're playing with these sliders, just pay attention to what it's doing over the entire surface. Like that. So I'm going to use a paint layer set to multiply, call that control. And I'm going to paint out the information that I don't want. So I don't want that in the cheek there. And I'm just going to just knock out some of the stuff that's going on around the cheeks there. I don't necessarily want that too much, so that's nice. So you can see there, just with that, I'm using the exact same color as my lips. I'm just set the entire layer to a multiply, and I'm using that paint. So that's just a holdover from the other layer. I blurred it a little bit, and then add a curvature map, and then I've used that paint layer to control it. Pretty good. Oops, didn't mean to do that. And if I want to darken that to make it more apparent, I just darken down this base color in it. So make it a tiny bit darker. What I'm also going to do to this is I'm going to add a ambient occlusion generator to this for pretty much the same thing I've just done, but instead of using because what the cavity does, it uses a normal map. I want to have all that crag information that I've got on my lips from the normal map. I want to use all this information. Now what I want to do is use the ambient occlusion map for the corners and the meeting points, the shadows. So with, without, with, without. Oh no, sorry. So I have to set this as a screen as well, don't I? So with, without, with, without, with, without. Now here's where I'm going to bring that control up above my ambient occlusion, because the ambient occlusion is making too many dark areas, so I'm going to use that control just to help me paint back some of that information. This is looking like a real person. And then the next one I'm just going to use to lighten the some parts of the lips now. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and black mask obviously. I'm going to paint in where I want this to go, so paint in. And I'm going to leave this white for now, because white's going to be very obvious to see the results. And then I can make it nice and subtle later on, but just for now I'm going to paint in this information. What time are we on now? Okay, so 1.5 hours, that's okay. Let's turn that off. So we're going to want it around there. In fact, I don't think I really needed to do that paint, to be honest. Because I'm going to add a generator to this. I'm going to add a curvature again. I'm going to turn that curvature into edges. Oh yeah, so I didn't really need to do that paint layer at all. Boom. And this is what I want. I want it to be on top of this. So let's go through again. Let's take off the information I don't want. So bring out all those sliders back down to 0. And then look for the ones which is doing the stuff that I want. So that's kind of the right one. So it might be a bit of a combination of these two. Soft and fine. Sharp is obviously not what I want. Or it might be, but there's a lot of stuff I need to do with this. Obviously I've got to do a lot of cleanup with this on the surface. You know, that skin's very frosty. She looks like she's frostbitten. Okay, so what does medium do? Medium does that, don't want that. Big, okay, so those definitely don't work. Okay. In fact, I can do a little bit of something here with this. I can make, I could put all my lips into a folder and then mask that folder. Okay, so this is something that we did last year, but we have probably forgotten about it. What I can do is I can add everything to a folder and then mask off that folder, so it doesn't matter what I do to this. If I only want to show that whole folder in like one area, then it should only show in that one area. It wouldn't give me this like whole frostiness around the mouth here. So what I'm going to do is make a new folder. Just call this lips. I believe this is going to work. I don't know why I'm doubting myself. I'm going to do it. So bring everything to do my lips in there. And then I'm going to add a black mask to this whole thing. There we go. So I'm adding a black mask and I'm painting just the lips back. So again, it's just that extra level of control. There we go. Yeah, I knew that would work. So yeah, all I've done there is, you know, use these black masks to do what I need to do on these individual layers that are in here, but controlling it on everything to do with this in just this one area. So where I had it before, for there, it was going over the entire surface. It's because the way these generators work, it goes over the entire surface. I then have to go back in there and do horrible mass paint overs. But because it's inside a folder, which is then, this whole folder is only contained inside this one area, it doesn't go anywhere else. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just change this color to something a bit more relevant. Like that. Nice. So we're really, really, really bringing that information back in there now. So let's take a bit of a pit stop. Let's do some cleaning up. And see what we've got. Okay, so So base 1, the first thing we put down, in this case anyway, is the brighter of the blood vessel colours. Pardon me. If we went to darker colour first and then put the light ones on top, doesn't matter. Absolutely does not matter. It's just a different way of doing it. Both ways that we do it, both in this video and the one we did in class, are both totally fine. Because then all we did is use one colour, but multiple. Oh, so you move my head because my layer's in the way now. There you go. There you go. So yeah, I've got my initial base here, and then I use one colour for my blood vessels. I just use lots of different modifiers, all set to screen. So screen will allow other things to show through, and it won't cover up. And I use that really nice control layer idea to control some of that information. And then we got the purplings, and we called it a day for the skin dermis there. That's all well and good. We can always go back and add more to that, because again, this is very non-destructive the way we're working. And then we did our skin the same way. So we did a first pass of, in this case I did like a big cloudy pass, and then I did a slightly tighter pass. We're using something that's a bit more sharper, and then I used again that control modifier, that paint modifier, just set to multiply, to paint, basically use it as an eraser to paint back in some of that information. And then I used just a simple colour on its own. This is nice and simple. I've just used a slightly brighter, slightly yellower, again very very slightly yellower colour, just to pick out some of that information. And then I faked that extra dermis information by, again, just the same colour as my blood vessels down here. I've just done that again, but just added that ambient occlusion generator to that and inverted it. And that, for me, does a ton of work. I love how that works. And after that, it's our lips. And that is very, very similar. So I've got a base tone there that I've just painted in and blurred in a little bit. And then I've used a slightly darker colour set to multiply to paint in, blur, then it's that curvature map to get that information. That could be darker, to be honest. I could go darker with that, I think. In fact, I could probably get rid of these two. Yeah, I don't really need those two initial layers, so I can get rid of them completely. So yeah, got that curvature to generate that curvature information there. And then the ambient occlusion, again, that ambient occlusion generator is just helping me get the shadow in the meeting point. And then I just use that control layer there just to control some stuff that I didn't actually need to control in the end, because I'm doing that with the stuff to do with this. In fact, let's drag these out of this folder, because you'll be able to see. There you go. So maybe I will leave these separate. Yeah, because, okay, so now that I'm going through my layers, I'm starting to see why I did certain things. And I've completely forgot, because I'm talking, I've completely forgot why I did them. Okay, so yeah, got the skin tone there. Yes, okay, so using that curvature and that ambient occlusion, I've then added like another slight kind of depth in there. But if I put all those in that folder, because I only masked off that lip area, I lose all this other information. Because then I just use that control, so that's what it looks like just on its own. But then I use that control modifier again to paint back in some of that colour, paint back some of that ambient occlusion. Again, reminding ourselves, all that is a paint layer set to a paint modifier set to multiply, and I'm just using black and white values to bring forward and push back, you know, values attached to it. And then I've used, again, the same jazz. I've just used a curvature map. Now that's actually helped me in places that I didn't realise it was helping me. It's adding a bit more pinkness to the eyes. And it's helped me punch out a little bit of this. So maybe I might go in and make a control layer to punch some of this back, but this is quite nice. It's very, very good. It's very, very good. Very, very nice. And again, you know, I can just go back and change stuff if I want to. So if this is all too dark for me, I can bring that back up, and then I'd have to, you know, modify. I'd have to just adjust that lightning layer, you know, compensate. I have to make sure my color values are correct. That's why I wasn't too bothered about getting these color tones correct at first, because I can always change them later on. Because that change made it really yellow, and this looks very greeny yellow, but we're all good. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a better, so I'll get rid of this lips, a better roughness layer. Because currently our roughness is working okay, but it's over the entire surface. It's a very flat, uniform thing over the entire surface. So what I'm going to do is paint with just roughness. And basically do the same thing, but only using the roughness channel. So this is my roughness layer there. So that's what it turned off. You can see it's very plastic. That's what it turned on. It's a bit better. But what I'm going to do is add a white mask this time. So I've got to think backwards in this one. Add a paint generator to that. Yes, okay. I completely have to remind myself how to do this one. So what I'm going to do here is add a white mask, because if I turn this into a black mask, everything gets super shiny, because this is going to take the base material specularity shininess, which is going to be this really, really shiny surface. So in fact what I'm going to do is just flip it and do a white mask, because this white mask will always show, whereas, you know, with the black mask we get rid of the information attached to that layer with like colors and stuff. In this case what it's going to do is maintain that color. So if I change this roughness value, it's still going to be visible. And what I'm going to do is paint black into it to make things a little bit shinier. So if I get my base value, I'm going to get, yeah, about 0.6 I'm going to have as my base value, like that. So there's a little bit of shine in there. I'm going to fill the layer. So I'm adding a fill layer. And then just add a really soft. So this is where I've got to be really subtle with what I do now. So I've got to be careful about adding stuff. I'm going to use some soft, so some clouds too. I'm going to put in. So you can see the difference there. On and off, on and off. Invert it. Okay. So I'm just going to increase that roughness to about 0.7 now. And then I'm going to add a generator. I'm going to see what an ambient occlusion will do me. So what is an ambient occlusion doing? So in this case, what it's doing is making the inside of my face, the inside in the darker areas, shinier, and because it's white on black, so all the white areas of ambient occlusion are going to be rough, all the black areas are going to be dark. But then if I was to flip it like this, then maybe that's what I want. So I can I'll change that to screen. I'll start to adjust it so I can see. Again, this is really, really subtle. So on, off, on, off. It's a really subtle change there. And then I'm going to add a paint layer, change it to screen. And so in this case, because my base level of my roughness is so low, I'm not able to add that extra level. So what I'm going to do is do another roughness layer. Set it to screen again, so whatever roughness is coming underneath will be visible still. I'm going to add a black mask this time, because what I want to do is only bring this in on my lips. So if I cycle through my masks, I should find, there you go, so I got a roughness, so you can see what's happening with the roughness there. Oh, sorry, I've set it to the screen. This is where things can get a little bit confusing if we forget this. At the very top of the layer stack here, we've been working in color this whole time. At the very top it says base color, so everything we see here is related to base color. If I want to change the way that these two layers I'm dealing with here, so I'll call this rough 1 and rough 2. If I want to change the way that these two things interact with each other, because we're dealing with roughness, I've got to change this at the top to roughness. There we go. So now we're dealing with the roughness, so I'm multiplying the roughness values on top of each other, which would kind of work differently to how we do color. I've done it again. I've painted directly. So I need to add a paint layer. I keep doing that. Why do I keep doing it? Because I'm very unprofessional. There you go. So I'm not going to spend ages doing this this part of the texture because it's not super demanding. You've just got to be careful. There you go. So, I mean, I should really be doing this with the stylus because it's a bit easier. All I've got to do is make sure that I'm rotating the camera and getting rid of all the really shiny bits where I don't want it to go. There you go. I could add another generator on this, set that to screen. So the modifiers, when we add a modifier to a layer there, if we're stacking things on top of each other but we still want everything to show through, they need to be set to screen. But it's different from when you're dealing with roughness materials, things that are more of the kind of the base material kind of things up here. Okay, that generator, I'm going to add a curvature generator to that. So you can see there how the curvature's actually just turned on a little bit more shyness to the face, which can, you know, that might be helpful, but it's not what I want. No. Painter's doing a thing. There you go. So again, turn off all the bits I don't want. Change it to cavities. So you can see you can use this on this flesh to to really have that. This is why a good norm map is really good, because all this information that has just kind of popped out then, it's not necessarily great unless I want something to look very wet or moist or whatever, or sweaty, greasy. But you can see how that normal map is producing all this information. If we were using a very kind of subpar normal map, or we just didn't do a good enough job, we wouldn't be able to have that information. But I don't want that. What I'm going to do is blend these in. Because contrary to what people might be thinking as well, you sometimes want a bit of shine in the creases. Like in the nasolabial fold, in the creases under the eye. Because, again, contrary to how you might think of it as like in industrial environments or in nature, the underside of something might be a bit drier, therefore it'd be duller and less shiny. We've got oil in our skin, so the top layer of our skin isn't actually skin, it's oil. And then we've got dermis, then we've got subdermis. And you'll find collections of oil in these areas. So we want to kind of blend these in, and there's no color as well. This is purely just roughness, and it's really great how powerful these are, because that's only white because of the light. So I'm going to bring that down a fair ways. Bring my fine up along the same kind of measure. Pop, pop, pop. So I'm going to bring all these down a little bit. There we go. You can take what these other modes do as well, because it's default edges, which is the top of something, and cavities is basically the opposite. That's the depth of something. The dual is basically both of them, which might be a bit too much for this, and unprocessed is kind of like a flat surface, I believe. So, but I'm going to go for cavities in this, and I'm going to really just be very subtle with this to try and finesse some of that information in. Yeah. And then I can use a good old control. So class control. Multiply. Let's see which way I need to be doing this on. Okay. So I need to get the light in the right position for this. So it's just why I'm hunched over the computer now. So now what I'm going to do is paint out areas that I don't want there to be any highlighting. And this is really subtle. This is super, super subtle. There you go. So that's the mask I'm doing. So maybe that's a bit too much in the eye there. So there you go. So all this grey area here, all this is where we're going to get that roughness actually coming through. So I can push some of that back a little bit. Because again, we don't want to have all the recesses having shine, because then that'll look very artificial and fake. Like very like a quick filter that you put on something that works in some areas but don't work in others. So but I'm more thinking about areas where you're going to have oily buildups. So there might be a little bit underneath the neck there, so paint some in some areas. I'll paint back the information, should I say. So I'm not painting it in, I'm painting it back. And you basically go through it, always checking and stuff, changing the lighting condition of the scene as well, because I've got the default panorama here. So what I can also do is go to display settings, this first tab here, change that panorama. Now I like Studio Tonka, don't I? There you go. And basically going through. And this is where I'm actually going to end this whole thing. So I'm going to save this. There you go. So I'm going to end the texturing process here, because this obviously can go on for a very, very long time, and this can get very, very technical. One thing that a lot of character artists do if they're sending stuff out for just portfolio pieces is to produce something called a specular map, which is like a roughness map, but it controls the entirety of the specularity, where it's like a blanket specularity, whereas a roughness map was more like a centralized control kind of thing. So a roughness will control the roughness. It's basically two different shiny maps that work in with each other. But I'm not going to bother going in with that, because it's, you know, it's too much to kind of force on everyone. But this is, you know, the point which I want everyone to get up to, you know, just working through this. And it's obvious where you're going to need to kind of work on stuff. You just got to observe stuff. Okay, so when we've done this, if we want to take this out to Sketchfab, if we want to take this into Substance, whatever, the next stage would be to actually export in these textures. Those lips are actually looking crap now. I need to go in there and fix those lips. But the next step would be to take out the textures. Dead easy. We already know how to do this. File, export textures. Make sure that we are sending them out to the right area. So I'm going to send these out to my head retopper images, and I'm going to make a new folder in here and just call it final. I'll put them into there like that. Size, I'm going to export these. So a few of you have asked, why can't you texture in 8K if we're making maps in 8K? I'm not sure why. I think it's probably something to do with like the processing power of the software can't do 8K, but we can take the textures out at 8K. So our final textures can be 8K, which is cool. But we can only texture actively at 4K. So like that, boom, that's got everything in there. If we just click on this here where it says new, this obviously is whatever your texture set list is named. Here it just shows you everything you've taken out. So you got color, obviously we want color. You got roughness, obviously we want roughness. We don't need metallic. Obviously we want normal. We don't need height, and we don't need emissive. Okay, so I'm only going to take out those four. I could probably leave, because we've not actually done anything that use a normal map in there. We could probably not do normal map, to be honest. So I'll just forget that one. So yeah, we're only going to do color and we're going to do roughness, because that is a person in general. Everything else isn't really there. We can use emissive to trick some stuff. We're not really on a mesh which could use a height information, unless we're doing things like blemishes and scar tissue. Obviously there's no metallics, and we've done our normals. So when I've done that, I just export and let it do its thing. There you go. Is it done? I think it's still doing or doing. Normally we should get some green right in here, but I think it's done. Yeah, I think it is done. I think it's just me being a bit paranoid. Oh, there it is. Boom. There you go. So it's just finalizing. So there you go. So it shows us that our text has been exported properly. Probably took a little bit of time because we were doing it at 8K then. So inside our folder, we will have two lovely nice textures. So we've got our skin, which is looking like this. Very nice. And then we've got our roughness, which, because we didn't spend a whole lot of time doing that, isn't the best roughness channel. It's too cloudy. Obviously, we didn't spend a lot of time fixing the roughness a lot. So this is not a super great roughness map, but you can see here I've cut the ears off, so you can see this delineation. But that's a good looking texture. Because then we can take our head into Sketchfab, apply these. Bob's your uncle. Take it into, I'll do the rendering thing in another video, but now we're good. And then, we can always just go back into Substance Painter and texture further. So you can do makeup, tattoos, change the skin tone. You might apply it to something, and your art director comes back and says, the skin tone's too light, the skin tone's too dark, whatever. You just come back in and change some stuff. But yeah, that is, 2 hours, 2 minutes. So this isn't obviously a finished head. I can't say that enough. This isn't a finished head. There's still a lot more to do. Obviously, we're missing things like a mouth bag, teeth, tongue, eyes, eyelashes, hair, all that kind of jazz. And my roughness map is rubbish, and I need to go back in there and fix that up a little bit. I'd spend a lot longer getting the roughness map looking good. I will do a proper video on doing roughness maps. Oh, you know what? Actually, we've completely forgot to do. We've completely forgot to do freckles and stuff. We'll do it very quickly, but there's not a whole lot to do with that because we've already used the same process. The only thing to look at for that would just be the images. So where's my PureRef? Where's my PureRef? PureRef, there you go. So I'm not going to go for this level of sun damage, but I'm going to take on board this kind of information, and I'm mainly looking for where you're going to have more build up and where you're going to have less build up. So it's more build up across areas that are going to face the sun though. There's over the chin, top of the cheek. I keep punching my mic. Sorry. Top of the cheeks, top of the nose, top of the forehead. That's where you're going to get the most damage. So you can see there. And inside creases, that's where you're not going to get it, because generally, if he's got his eyes open, that's where a crease is going to be. If he's straining his eyes like that, he's going to crease there. Obviously, his lips are in shade, so he's not going to get that point. So there are underneath his nose there. So there are points. And I've got to darken the inside nose as well, don't I? So let's give her some freckles. This is very easy. I am just going to add a fill layer. So I should be naming these layers as well. So lips lighter. I'll put these into a folder because they're just roughness. I'll call it roughness. There you go. So yes, new fill layer, just color, and then I got the color of my skin damage. Turn that up a bit. Like that. I'm going to turn this out. It's being a bit sluggish, so I'm just going to turn down my document size for this. So that's my freckles. And we're just going to apply this the same way we approached everything. So a black mask. I'm going to do a paint modifier. Like that, and I'm going to get a nice speckly brush. I'm going to use two kind of speckly brushes. Two freckly brushes. I'm going to start off with something which is pretty round. I mean, dots is quite nice. Let's do that. And I'm going to go for the really subtle stuff first. So let's bring that position jitter up a little bit. Angle jitter all the way up. Flow jitter. Yep. Spacing, I'm going to just punch up a little bit. Maybe the size jitter needs to be brought down. A bit too much difference in that one. There you go. So I'm going to control all these. This looks a little bit OTT at first, and it is. But obviously we're going to control these a bit more. Okay, so boom. Now, so I'm not going to add another layer yet. What I'm going to do is add a filter above this. So these are my really soft ones. These are my really, really subtle soft ones, but I need to see what I'm doing first of all. So I brought in that. I'm going to add a filter above this. And then I can have a play with a few things. So I can play with a couple of different blurs in this. So I've either got a slope blur, or I've got a warp. So if my slope blur, I'll blur slope, like this one. So you see quickly what happens there. Now this one you do have to really pull back the intensity. But what I'm trying to do is get away from that perfect round shape and add a bit more break up to it, because obviously it's got to follow the skin. So I can see if this works for me. It might not actually work, but this is what you got to gauge. So this intensity as well. So this one is level 1. It's really sensitive. If I go up to 10, it's a little bit less sensitive. So I can play with this slider a bit more. If I go up to 100, it's even more less sensitive. So there, that goes from there to there. That's actually quite nice. That's no slope blur whatsoever. That's with intensity divider 100 to max. So it's breaking them up a little bit. And then quality is just basically the quality of that. And that can sometimes, bringing down the quality can sometimes help. Because again, you're breaking them up a little bit more, but if you go too low, as you can see, it kind of goes a bit wacky. But I think I'm going to leave that as 100. And, what does that do? What does that do? Play with these. These aren't going to affect anything else. They're only going to affect the thing you're working on. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to slap a warp blur, the warp filter on top of this to see what that does. So the warp filter is the other one. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll slap it on. Where's warp? There's warp. But I'll turn off slope blur while I'm doing this. So warp blur works similar to slope blur. It basically just distorts the shape, and you've even got this intensity divider. You got a couple of different variations of warp. So you can see how they do, but they look like they're not going to really help. This almost creates like ripples, where slope blur works like it crystallizes the map essentially and creates everything turns everything into slopes and sharp. So any kind of like soft gradient, it tries to turn into sharper kind of faceted crystallized edges. What warp does, it turns everything, it ripples everything like water. So again, it's something that you got to be really subtle with. So if that's our 10, let's go up to 1,000. So that's doing something. It's doing a little bit of something. Let's go back down to 100. Okay, so you can decide between yourselves like that. And then I'm going to just turn the original paint down like that. And then I can use that control. So add a paint layer, call it control. So this is like control 1, so I might use a couple of controls in this one. Control 1. Multiply. So what I'm doing there is I'm erasing but I've still got that spotty brush turned on as well, so it's still helping with my randomize. If I actually want to just fully get rid of one, I just turn to like a hard brush there and just get rid of, so I can get rid of the ones completely that I want to get rid of, like ones that are a bit kind of in areas I don't want them to show. And then I can go back to something a bit more random to chop up that shape a bit more, make it a bit more random, but spotty like them dots I've just been using. There you go. So you can see a little bit of freckle going on there. New fill layer. Sorry, new paint layer, not fill layer at all, innit? New paint layer. Now this one, again, we're on the exact same layer, but this time I'm just doing tighter groupings. So again, it's one color, it's one layer. I'm just using these modifiers. So what I'm going to do is think, right, where do I want to have concentrations of the big, more prominent wrinkles? Well, I have got one that I'd want to point out right there. I've got a few of these which I've actually put in the texture. So there are a few that I actually want to paint in manually. What I'll do is Is there a less spotty brush? A less spotty brush. I don't want fingerprints. I don't want ink splatter. Definitely don't want that. Definitely don't want nails. Okay, so the dots is probably looking like the best. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to turn the spawn of these down. So, there you go. So, right at the bottom of the brush menu there. So I can turn the spawn up and down. Actually, let's turn the whole texture back up to 4K. There we go. Because right, so we've got all these different layers on now, all these different layers working. This is going to chug a little bit more. Okay. Right, so now I'm going to go make another control layer. Let's go to control 2. And I'm going to use just a big old flat brush. And I'm going to do some really like... I'm going to really pick out some stuff now. One thing I want to stay away from is they're looking dirty. I don't want these to look like mud. Unless that's the character. But then that's a whole different layer that you're doing yourself. You know, if we are doing a character which is going to look muddy, we do that near the end. Because we've got to get the skin done first. What I'm doing here is just getting those, I think on beauty spots, don't they? Them little beauty spots. Because I've put these down in clusters, I'm going finding them clusters and then deciding to basically leave one behind. So I get rid of all them. They're floating about. I missed them before. Get rid of you. Because sometimes as I put these down, even though I didn't stroke in a direction, if I was like click, 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 there is a kind of directionality to something. So I want to invite back some of that more random shape. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's looking okay. But then I do have that the actual spot there. So I'll get a nice soft brush, basic soft. Oh, there you go. No, it's not quite right. That doesn't look quite right. Yeah. Did I put any more on? Nope. So I put those in, but I want to push them back a little. But I don't want to completely get rid of him. But I've just turned down my on my control layer. I've gone to my black, and then I've just brought down the flow and the opacity, so I can kind of knock them back a little bit. Let's do one little like pass. There we go. Maybe boop, boop, a couple times on that one. Yeah. Nice. I think I'll do one last pass on. Yeah, I'll do one last pass on the skin. Fill layer, color. I'm going to take the color from the dermis color, so that deep red. I'm going to spots. Black layer. Paint layer. I'm going to find that dot. There's something called dot erased, which looks quite nice. So yeah, that looks okay. But again, that spawn, I want to bring that spawn rate right down. Play with some of the settings. Oh, sorry, my head's in the way. So what I'm doing here is I'm at the bottom of this dots erase. So I've just gone to the brush menu in my assets, and I found this dot. Where's it gone? There's something called dots erased. There you go. Dots erased. And that brush, if you scroll down to the very bottom, some of the options for those are talking about spawn rates. As you can see there in the, well, if you look there, as I'm playing with the spawn rates there, you'll see that all kind of update. So what I want to do is, maybe not that one, but I'll do this one, yeah. Bring on spawn rates. So see what, okay, what does layer 1 do? Okay, that's layer 1. Okay, that's quite nice. Yeah. Okay, this is just one last little break up to the surface of the skin. Maybe that red's a bit too dark. Yeah, like that, okay. Much more that kind of colour. So bring this down a little bit. Like that. Add a filter, so stuff we've already done before. I'm just going to add a filter. Add a slope blur. Put it up to 10. Maybe to 100. Yeah, I think 100's working for me on that one. Yeah. Anyway. And I'll leave all that alone there. Okay. Really subtle stuff for you. This is super subtle stuff. And then I'm going to make a control layer. I love those control. When I learned how to do these control modifiers, I was well happy. Because you know me, I like control. I like non-destructive workflows. And this is a supremely non-destructive workflow. So maybe I use a bit more. I'll up the spawn rate on this. Like that, there you go. Yeah. So this is really, really subtle stuff I'm doing now. But I'm basically just making a load of very, very small spots, really pushing them back, and then getting rid of a bunch of them, but as randomly as possible. In fact, what I'm going to do is go back here. And do the same thing. Just bring the position here in a little bit. Yeah. So use that randomness to knock back some of those more artificial looking freckles. Like there, we've got some really artificial ones in the cheeks and face there. Yeah, okay. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to leave it there, but I'm just going to jump back to this and just remind you that there is still an incredible amount of that red showing through. That's why we don't want to just fill an entire layer with a flat color and build up from this, because we want to get that really natural that build up. So there's still an incredible amount of that red showing through. Again, you take your time with all this kind of stuff. You take your time, take your time, take your time. Look at your references. Really look at these cross-polarized photography images and these RBX images. But the most complex thing I've done in that entire thing was probably the roughness stuff at the very top. Everything else was just the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. Fill layer, black mask, modifiers. Yeah, the control modifiers are probably one of the other more kind of complex ways of like methods, but it's just a paint layer with set to multiply, and black you're removing everything that's underneath it, and white you're adding everything else that's underneath it. So you're not even permanently erasing stuff, you're just kind of making it temporarily invisible, which is super, super sick. Because then at that point what I can do is just, again, save out those images, export textures, everything should be the same, doing the exact same thing, export, and we'll see some updated versions coming in here in a second. So remember, it's going to take a little bit of time for this last bit just to process, because it's an 8K. We're doing it at highest resolution maps. But I'm interested to see what the color map looks like, the base color map looks like. That roughness map again, I'm going to have to spend a bit of time. I'll probably do a video just on the roughness map, like a little short one. There we go. Nice. That's looking really, really nice. So, humans, probably one of the hardest things to model, one of the easiest things to, in fact the easiest thing to UV, and one of the easiest things to texture. You've just got to kind of be aware of everything that you're doing. So what's that? 2.5 hours long video, but we've gone through everything pretty much there to do with the texturing that we're expected to know at this point. When we come to do the next stage, is obviously then we've got to look at different skin. Everything has been more in the that we've looked at has been more in the Caucasian, Eastern Europe, going down to Middle Eastern skin palette kind of thing. Just because when you're dealing with lighter skin tones, it's easier to see the reds come through and stuff like that. It's easy to be aware of those palettes. But then when you're dealing with much darker skin tones, or skin tones that are more like the green palette, green, brown, yellow, red kind of palettes, it's harder. It is harder to do to do those skin tones justice. But they are a little bit easier in some other areas where, like the yellower areas of their skins are much more prevalent. Whereas ours, you have to be very, very subtle. But the redder areas of our skin are really prevalent, whereas the redder areas of their skin are not at all, because they pretty much get taken over by the darker pigments, the darker pigments of the skin. Cool. So nice long video there for you, but that goes through everything. So combine that with the retopology video, combine that with a projection video. You've got a complete, so far we've got the complete step-by-step to do a person's head. And in this case, it's just about doing it. That's the thing about this, you've just got to do it. Cool.